Awesome. All right. I really appreciate you guys being here, especially with this topic that has not been talked about before or honestly and openly. And I kind of wanted to give a little origin story of how this kind of came about and introduce my lovely panelists that are willing to be vulnerable and open and share their families with all of us. It takes a lot of courage to be able to do that too. So I was a little bit intentional with why I chose my panelists for how they've impacted my growth. In January, I was about 27 weeks pregnant, and the submission time came out for some topic ideas, and I was like, you know what? Like, this is my fourth kid. Like, what is happening? I think I'm going to talk about the balance for business and babies. And I shot a text over to Angus, who's one of my constants, go-to parent supporters, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, yeah, sounds great, Hill. Good job. And then he emailed me a list of names to be on my panel. And I was like, no, like, you're it, tag, you're in this with me, right? So he graciously decided to join with us. But he is a very big supporter and advocate, never challenges me when I say I want to do this in my career and being a mom, and checks in on being the mom that I am, as well as my professional place, and so I appreciate that. We need a tribe. Dr. Eddie O'Connor over here is my other panelist that when I first came in the field, if you've known me for that long, the only thing I've ever wanted to do was to be a mom. And I wanted to be a mom of 4 kids. And everybody knows that. Like, I told them all, I'm gonna have 4 babies. They're like, oh, yep, okay, you do that. But I had someone who had 4 kids that I could look up to. And it was awesome. This one could get a little emotional. So I'm appreciative of that. And then, if you don't know Dr. Jess Bartley, in my pregnant state at about 30 weeks now, we're at midwinter meetings for a leadership conference, and we're sitting there, and we're discussing who could be next leader in the field and who we could ask to tag in to maybe do something. And there was a comment made that said, you know, I think that they might be having a baby, and they might be a little bit busy, and their schedule might not a lot of time for them to be a leader. And I'm like cringing inside. Like, my face is probably red. I'm probably crying because, again, I'm emotional, 30 weeks pregnant, right? Or every day of my life. And, you know, Jess just stopped and said, wait a minute, like, we can't assume what someone else's schedule is like. And we can't assume what someone's life is like. We just need to ask them. And it was the most powerful moment. Like, I thought there was like a superhero light on her that was like shining. And I was like, yes, woman. Like, we cannot assume for men or women what their life is like just because they're a parent. And so I hope that through our talk, we can empathetically engage in this moment, and whether you're a parent or not a parent, you're a colleague of someone who is a parent, you have clients that might be parents, like, we just need to learn a little bit different of how we talk about things, and how the intention might not be harmful, but the impact can be pretty real. And this is why all of them were intentional, because I have wonderful rock star parents and professionals in this field, you know that, but all of these panelists have impacted me and my growth substantially. So welcome them. So what we'd like to do is introduce you to our families, a little quick tidbit so you know our backgrounds, and then we're gonna start the discussion. And I won't be the only one talking, I promise, but I will start. These are my lovely babies. I just love them, they're so cute. They are 7, 5, 3, and 4 months. And that's like my rock star girl tribe. And so, yeah. It's up to you.
So these are my 4, and I just took this picture recently. So I've got an 18-year-old that just went off to U of M. So this was a great time, as Hillary asked me, because all of a sudden, his childhood was over, and he was out of the house. Quick story about that. When he came home, my first baby took him home, and I'll never forget this moment where he's in his bedroom the first night, and I'm holding him, and it's my first child, and I start crying because he's going to go to college one day and leave me. And this is a true story, and I was like, oh my God, okay, relax, I've got plenty of time. And I knew his senior year that this time was coming. And I'll talk more about that later. Then I've got the twins in the middle who are 16, and my youngest just turned 13. And it's not cliche when they say, you know, that this time goes fast, but at the same time, boy, it goes really slow, like when you look at it at the day. But I love this contrast of it, that this is a particular time of life that is really dense with a focus on kids, and you have to be intentional. But those are my 4.
All right, and this is my little one. She just turned 2, and I am 4 months pregnant, so been managing a lot with that. And then also wanted to point out my husband, he's also in the field, and so that will come up quite a bit as far as balance. So we met in graduate school, we're both in sports psychology. He works with special forces in the military, but I think that's an important part when it comes to balance and trying to figure out how we do this together. So that's me.
So sorry for the overload. I got a bit carried away here. I'm like the 4, which I worship you guys. I can't even fathom 4. I have 2, and that's a full team job. So Will and Tom are my little guys. They're 6 and 4, and one thing that you'll notice on the bottom with the kind of family pic is a lot of people in there. And so my wife and I, so my job involves a lot of travel. So over 100 days a year, and you can kind of see my ambassador elite status for those MLB people in the room, or probably all have that by now. And my recovery scores, the FaceTime, my Nest Cam, a lot of my interaction in life with them has to be virtual. And so that's a reality. But the team of support, is something I'll refer to a little bit too. Is my wife's an emergency room doctor, so just as I think about having a bad day, or that we're struggling with some tough things, I shut up very quickly because it really puts things into perspective. And that but her shift work is nights, weekends. It's very challenging. And so, her parents live a mile away from us. We also decided to get an au pair who actually lives in our house. And so, our kids have grown up not knowing who's going to pick them up from school, who's going to be there in the morning, who's putting them there to bed. But that's, as bad as that sounds, it's a question that they ask. And that the fun thing is that they have a rich group of people that they interact with every day, and so but it really does challenge us into the idea of quality time and relationships as opposed to time and presence. And so I think that's an ongoing battle with perspective, priorities, and I think many of the things that we may bring up here too.
So our title is The Battle for Balance, but we kind of maybe all have some philosophical differences if balance actually exists. So I wanted to ask our panelists do you believe balance exists? So Eddie, why don't you start?
Absolutely not. And the angle that I want to take with this is, and this has been sort of a real struggle, I think as performance excellence people, it's all about we have to be great, and I want to be great in everything. And then that makes it impossible. Like if we end up balancing, you could maybe end up being average, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think average is a bad term, but if I have this drive to be the very best father, and I've got this idea about how a great psychologist I want to be, and I want to be in shape, and I want to recover, every time I pick to do one thing, it comes at the cost of something else. And so in my daily life, I literally struggle with the choices. Like I've got another complicating factor is that I'm a single dad of 4. So a divorce and I've got them half time, thank God for that. And my parents have passed and had lived in another state, so I don't have any assistance or help there. So every minute of my time, when I invested in one area, if I go to the gym, well, then that means I didn't do the video to promote my practice, and I'm missing dinner with the kids. So if I stay and have dinner with the kids, I miss the workout and I'm getting out of shape, and I still don't get that video done. But if I stay and I stop and I do that video, well, now I'm getting out of shape. And it's not, again, that I'm chronically miserable. But I am chronically guilty. I do have we've got this world where we're supposed to excel, and if you're feeling bad, somebody wants to fix it. Like, well, you're doing a great job here, and that's okay. And it's like, well, no, it's not. Like, I come from a mindfulness approach, and so I guess the way I'd like to say it is, like, I'm happy and sad all the time. And these are not conflicting emotions. I mean, while they are, it's like I have to experience them both. There's nothing wrong with me feeling like I'm trying to make it feel like there's nothing wrong with me not feeling bad about some of this stuff. And here's one story again to maybe illustrate it. It just happened on Saturday. Busy with presentations. And my youngest son, 13, was able to get an extra day with me. His mom let him kind of come over, but I had preparations for the conference. I had another presentation that I was doing. I hadn't done laundry in a week. My other daughter had needed something. And so I was like, yeah, come over. We'll do some stuff. Oh, the leaves had fallen, Halloween decorations, life. And so he come over, and we took him to lunch, and I thought that was enough. And he's staying with me. He's folding laundry. He's looking pissed off about it. And I'm like, what's the matter, bud? Like, because we were getting the day together. And he turns to me crying, and he's like, I thought we were going to go on a date and play games. And so my heart broke, and I was like, yeah, gosh, I really want to do that. And so I did. After we folded the rest of the laundry, we sat and we played chess, but it was like I could only do it like half hour at a time. And that's the chronic guilt. There is no balance. There's just where you choose to invest.
Yeah, so about guilt, my balance is a little bit different. So I view balance first that it's not equal, it's not 50-50, but I do feel that what I'm putting in, if it's right now this week being away, I came in on Sunday, I go back on Sunday. The number one question I've got for those that knew or were gonna know that I had a 4-month-old, oh my gosh, how are you doing? How are you handling that? And while I love that question and you're checking into how I'm handling it, I'm like rock star here, ready to like present and engage and connect, and like I feel guilty for not feeling guilty. Like I'm here, this is my path, and I don't feel guilty about it. And maybe it's because it's my 4th kid, but I was doing this with my 1st kid. Like every other ass, I'm like pregnant guys, like waddling around. Like you see me, I'm in it. So I don't feel guilty about it. Like my motto in life is I'm gonna live my life and not put my dreams on hold, and I'm not gonna change my dreams to live my life. Like, I'm gonna be able to do both of them. And so some weeks it looks 90% in for work and 10% in for family, and then that balance shifts because I can't FaceTime every day that you'd think, because FaceTime can cause tantrums and a ruckus, and so then we'll just do phone calls, or I won't, and I'll just get picture updates, and I have to know what's happening in their world, because the reality is their world has not shifted this week. Mine has, because I'm here. They get up, they go to school, they get picked up. Like, I don't have an awesome, cool tribe. I got my husband, and my other favorite comment is, who's watching your kids? Their dad's dadding them. Well, actually, might have said he's mother effing dadding them, because I get angry because he's a dad and we're a partner and he did this with me, and he's not babysitting. He is a dad, and he's a rock star because he gets to take him to McDonald's and he gets to take him to the grocery store. And I get shamed if my kid at the grocery store happens to run around like a hoodlum because she's cool and a teenager. And he is a rock star. No, dads, moms, we do it together. Like, it's just, we got to shift the perspective. So for me, balance is I'm all in here, I'm all in there. We know what it takes to get there. And that's cool. That's okay.
Yeah. And I think I really agree with Hillary that I actually do think balance exists, but it's not equal. Like it actually always feels like a balancing act, and I call it the balancing act. So I'm an ACT-trained therapist, acceptance and commitment therapy, and the way I look at it is I have a number of values, and they're always coming into conflict, and I'm always having to shift one for another, and I feel like I often make very thoughtful choices about it, and so I will say I feel a little bit of guilt sometimes, and I love being here, and I love going on a lot of the trips that I'm going on, and I love spending time with my family, and so I try to be all in when I'm in. And again, the guilt comes in a little bit, mostly because there's tantrums or things that are going on at home. So
the crying in the phone, I'm like, I can't do it.
yeah. So I was talking, or I guess we weren't having an actual conversation with my 2-year-old, but she apparently only will wear her cupcake pajamas, her fleece pajamas, and has literally been in them for 3 days with my mother. And she tried to wash them, and so I watched my 2-year-old walk into the laundry room, dump the laundry basket over, climb onto it, and just peer into the washer. And stare at them and cry. So, this was all on FaceTime. So there was the guilt that I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I've never had her in cupcake pajamas for 3 days, but that's okay. So I do feel like there's a balancing board somewhere and a balancing act, and but it is always kind of at the expense of something else.
Cool. So in the very first session of the week here on Wednesday, I guess slightly controversial statement I made turned into a hashtag pretty quickly, which was balance is bullshit. And I think it's part of what generates the guilt. Definite strong theme across here. But Scott Drawer, a friend of mine, the performance director of Team Sky, and has done all this great stuff. And I was talking to him about it, of this struggling with balance, and he said to me too, like, balance is bullshit. The way he defines it is blend, and that this illusion it creates this idea that it should be 50-50, and it's really not. But that we think we need to be spending more, and it's really about examining what's right for you, and then that it shifts. So for me, I'm gone for a week, and I'm back for a week, and that's pretty much my pattern for about 6 months. And so it's fairly concentrated with a lot of time away, and it creates hardships. And I think one of the things that I think centers around the guilt piece is that I choose this, and I really enjoy this. But I'm choosing it on behalf and sometimes at the expense of, the other people in my life. And that's I think the crux of the hard part, is because I know I don't have to do it. I could do something else, and it's not as challenging perhaps or rewarding. And so I think that's the rub around that. But certainly the illusion of balance and prioritizing is at the heart of that.
So our next question is, what would you or what have you changed to help find the balance? Like, how have you done it? How have you changed? How have you adapted? How do you create the blend? And maybe Jess, you could start with this one.
Sure. So a little background. I've primarily been in college athletics. I have a master's in sports psychology and a doctorate in clinical psychology. And so I've been in a lot of athletic departments with long hours. And I remember talking to my husband about how unsustainable that was if we were going to have kids. And so we decided, I applied for a faculty position, and it really worked. And we decided that was the time, like, it felt like that was the best position for me to be in, to have kids. I should also mention, and Angus knows, that he's a contractor, and he's lost his contract before. And so we needed one of us to have a stable job, and he could have the contract. So there's a lot of kind of give and take that we've done. I think even more specifically is my work outside of faculty. So we live in Denver, and I commute to Denver and live in Colorado Springs. So I do a lot of work with the USOPC. I'm contracted with a number of teams, and international travel has been really hard. And so one of the things that I did change, I'll say I got a contract with USA Karate when I was 3 months pregnant, and debated whether I was going to even tell them if I was pregnant or not. So I decided to be honest and just say, this is what the next few years is going to look like. And but I signed up to travel internationally once a month, once my daughter was 3 months old, and that was the worst decision. And I had more trips that were asked of me and more that were kind of put onto me. And I started really resenting being there. I started setting some boundaries for myself. I started saying I'm not going to be gone for more than a week. Like, a week felt okay to me, but anything longer just felt like too much. I also started to push the boundaries a little bit. So I'm from Dallas, and every time we had a camp in Dallas, I asked if my little one could come, and we would stay with my grandparents. So I started to really understand my value with some of these organizations, and push and start to say, look, if you want me here, it needs to be like this. And so those have been some of the changes I've made. The other thing I'll even say is, in the last year, I decided to only travel once every 3 months with USA Karate. And when I'm there, I was really there, but I actually negotiated a rate to where I would be available via video chat. And because I had put in the time, because I did travel with them internationally, I was able to negotiate that. And I have athletes, and again, this is trying to figure out boundaries, but I have athletes where it's 4 a.m. my time, but I'm available, and I will figure that out. But it's better than me taking a 36-hour round trip flight to Tokyo. So there was some things that we're trying to work out, but again, it was, you know, I really wanted to be in, I wanted to be invested. So there have been like significant changes I've made in the last year that have helped me, but the remote has been amazing. Again, a lot of 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. calls, but it's really working. So that was one of the things that changed with me, is to set better boundaries and to really kind of push that a little bit.
This is an interesting question, because I think I've already tried to change and accommodate and be flexible, and thank goodness technology does allow a massive piece of that. And that my kids are, you know, they love FaceTiming all the time, but actually Hill makes a good point too. Sometimes you also have to be considerate of the person who's trying to get them to bed. But you know, one thing that I have found helpful too is just having little things that are special, right? So like I do the most ridiculous, creative, like 2-minute stories going to bed at night. You know, we've even done little kind of date nights. So with 2 kids, the grandparents will take one for a night, and you know, I get to spend a quality night with a movie with one of them. So just making sure that sometimes, you know, when I'm home and I'm exhausted and I'm walking in through the door, it's like full on. You know, it's 100%. And what I want to do is sit down and chill, and I know that that's not an option. And so sometimes you don't give the best version of yourself with the kid, and I think that is a really key part, and being deliberate and thoughtful about not just yourself, but also how can you be sustainable and find ways to, like Eddie's story with the games. It's very easy to just focus on what we need to get done, as opposed to what is meaningful for your kids too, and then I think also your spouse, to make sure that you're creating that room and the support and proactive thought around that. So I think in terms of change, I think the critical piece are the assumptions that you might have, and that making sure your spouse is aligned. So I had, for example, an option on my contract. I was given a 3-year deal, and then, you know, my bosses were very generous and asked me what did I want, and how long did I want, and I said only 2 years, even though I could have asked for more, because it was a family decision. I wanted to make sure that it was sustainable, and even if that maybe compromises my future, but that even if it's something I know I really wanted, to make sure that they had a voice, because this was also this is something we had to do together. So I think that expectation communication piece is massive.
So I think it is a choice that I get to do this, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't have the support at home. And I think that's really key, because I'm a clinical sports psychologist. I've been my own boss since I entered into the field. I've had babies. With 1 semester left on my doctorate program, I was having my first kid, and I could only take 2 weeks off, or I'd have to suspend and like take a medical leave and then graduate late. And I was like, that's not happening. I'm going to graduate early because you said that. So I like rose to this challenge. This is a little bit. I didn't get maternity leave, because in private practice you don't get maternity leave, and I would make no money. And I had a kid during a postdoc, and during a postdoc I could take a certain amount of time off, or I'd have to put in a form to fill out a medical waiver, and I didn't want to do that. So I was like, all right, I'll come back after 3 weeks. And then my other 2, I just chose to. I don't think I learned how to change things until my 4th kid, which is right now. I'm an entrepreneur, I have other businesses, and I decided to quit a job, 34 weeks pregnant, and I was like, I'm not going to teach. I'm going to go full-time private practice because I'm growing and expanding, and I'm going to invest in this. But with that, we said, when will you be home? I'm tired of you coming home late, Mom, every night. Like, when will we be home? So I don't work on Tuesdays. I don't work on the weekends. I have 2 nights that I'm guaranteed to have dinner with my family. There's some oddities in there if I have to travel, like Tuesday's my travel day too. But in the most part, I have days that I'm set home with just the littles. We rotate dates. But the days that I'm in my practice, it's 14 hours. And I have a plan when I get into my driveway. I listen to one more song on my playlist or the radio before I turn the key, and I walk in the door. Because the minute I walk in that door, I am Mom. And I am all in, and my husband then is going to go do his rotating shift of whatever creative thing he wants to do. Or we're like tag teaming it up, and I'm doing some kids to bed, random kid stories. But I've decided to make time because it's the only thing you can lose. And I think there's a difference for that is finding ways to make time with kids. I used to not be up I used to not do mornings. Like I wouldn't get the kids to school every day, or I couldn't put them to bed every day. Sometimes I'd go 36 hours without seeing one of my kids, which in private practice world, that seems crazy. But now I do every morning. I take every kid to school. I have breakfast with all of them. And I'm home for bed at least 3 nights a week.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm actually going last because those are all fantastic suggestions. I've had to make the same things. There are practical choices that you can make. But what I'm finding and what I'm striving for this year in particular, like that picture of a scale looks very delicate. And I experience it as such. So like what I do to find balance is I change the entire paradigm. So I used to say, oh, it's not balance, it's synergy. I found other words for it. I'm throwing those out too. Like it doesn't exist. So for me, really what I'm focusing on is learning how to be content. You know, the idea here, as I had said, is like, I don't know if you had heard it, I was listening with my ACT ears, but this idea of acceptance and really understanding that my life is suffering. Again, I don't mean to be depressive or anything here, but there's no way to win this game. And yet I am still trying to win it. I've presented on this. I teach athletes this all the time. And to integrate this perspective into my own life of accepting that this is the way it is. And then somebody's like, oh, well, but you're a good dad, and oh, but you've done this, and you know, with the divorce, now I've got, and I have much more quality time versus the quantity, and there's been some good things, talk about goodness that comes out of adversity. But that's still all a way to try to fix it, so that if it's okay. And so I'm really just trying to drop the idea, like I teach, but to live it is a hell of a lot harder, you know, this real idea that this sucks. And that's okay, because life is hard. And then I find that there's a peace in that. And as I had said earlier, that as many of you had said, when you really get into what you're doing, when I have that athlete in front of me, or I'm doing my workout, and I'm not doing all the other things that I want to do, but this moment is rich, and it's okay, and it's good. And I can want to be somewhere else and bring myself here. I can allow those negative emotions to be with me on all of them without being overwhelmed. So I was thinking about this in my head. I'm like, I'm going to come off and people are going to be like, well, we got a good therapist for you. And I'd be like, no, that's exactly the point. I don't have to fix this. I don't want to fix this. So changing the whole paradigm, I've thrown out those words. I don't want them swimming in my head. I want acceptance, and I want to welcome the suffering as a part of the process of life.
Yeah, and I meant to make this comment earlier, but Eddie's got people doing laundry. Like, you should see our house. I have 4 girls and me. I'm another woman who has lots of clothes. Like laundry's on our couch probably 5 days out of the 7. And if people are going to come over, like, I pick it up and I shove it on my bed, and like I shut the door. And it just like doesn't get it just doesn't get folded, or it does like one day and then I gotta put them away. Like, it's just a hot mess. Like, which is where we're at, you know. Like, I don't get laundry folded for me. Okay, so this is a good one. What has been the biggest challenge you didn't expect to experience with babies and business? And I think I am up to start this one. So this is a recent one, right? You think we've had lots of challenges, but this one is about 3 weeks ago. I have an opportunity to go travel out and meet with one of the professional teams that I'm going to work with, and I've been spending a year kind of cultivating this relationship, right? It's for some assessments that I do, and we've done FaceTime, I've done phone calls. Like, I feel like I really know the front office of this team, and I'm so excited to just go meet them, right? It's going to be my first time away from my kiddo, but it's only a day trip, right? In and out, 12 hours, maybe 1 to 3 hour meeting, we didn't really know, but I was gonna land, go straight to the stadium, go back to the airport. But I gotta bring my pump, right? So my pump looks kind of like a cool little mini backpack. So I'm like traveling, got my work bag, got my backpack, I'm ready to go. But I'm like looking at my time and I'm like, where am I gonna pump? Like, and pumping is not like a public thing you can do. You can't strap on your shawl and just like pump it out in the room. Like, nursing was still a little bit like taboo. Like, we now legally can do that in every state, thankfully. I didn't know it was legal like a year ago. But pumping's not something you can do, and I'm like, I'm going to need to pump. Flying and expressing milk and like feeding my kid are things that are really a priority to me. And so I couldn't show up at their office and be like, nice to meet you, can I pump here? Like, before we have our great meeting that I'm trying to like make this business relationship with. So I call my business partner, and I was just like, hey, you know, Chris, do you got an outlet in your car? Can I pump on our way to the meeting? Thank goodness Chris is a father, and he's not embarrassed by this, and he's been through this before, and he shows up at the airport with an outlet, a cooler, that I could keep my milk cold and keep it frozen, which was so much more thoughtful because I hadn't even thought about that, like what am I gonna do with that? But I remember texting Angus, and I was embarrassed to even ask Chris. I was embarrassed to be like, Angus, I never thought I'd have to say this to somebody, where am I gonna pump? I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I was ashamed to ask about that because it felt shameful, but it's how I feed my kids, so I was never expecting that. But we worked out. I pumped, it was good, me went great, It was a little awkward in the car, but we made it work.
Do I have to follow that? I have to follow that. So challenges, I think mine were just a little broader. So I've always wanted kids, but I don't think I realized until I had a little one and I'm having more how much it would pull me away from what I love and how long I have trained to be in sports psychology and how much I love all of the cool things I'm doing. And that's where, again, the guilt comes in, is that I love this little person so much and I love our little family so much that I love to get home. So after trips, I'm looking for little things to get her on a trip. I'm so excited to get home. So that's probably been my biggest challenge, and it's a little more broad than Hillary's, but it's just it's hard. It's hard to go away. It's hard to leave her. And I think I also want to be realistic that I was dying on my maternity leave. I was so ready to get back out there and to work. And so for me, that's why I do think balance exists, because I almost felt like I needed to be working. I needed to be out there doing this. And I have worked really, really hard. So I wanted to find the balance and try to figure out, okay, I went on I think she was maybe 7 months, and I went on a 14-day trip with US Track and Field, and I was itching. I was like, I will never do this again. So having those experiences and saying okay, this was too long, this wasn't enough, let me do this. That I've had other things where I went to Tokyo and I literally was in the air for 36-ish hours and on the ground for 30. That didn't work either. So there's these balances of what exactly am I trying to get at? What do I want to do? And again, we keep talking balance. And I think the one other thing I wanted to add is to start saying no. There's positions and contracts I've eliminated or haven't renewed. Doing the private practice thing, it's hard, and it's hard to say no. And I will say I'm very fortunate to have my base as faculty and trying to figure out what are those extra projects, what's really meaningful, what's worth, whether it is time away or even financially, what's worth being away from my family. So I've gotten a little bit better about that, but it's a huge challenge.
The biggest challenge is, and any of you could have told me this a long time ago, I'm kind of mad that you didn't, I can't do it all. And I've said that to people all the time, and it's become so cliche, but I freaking thought I could do it all. And that has been really, really hard to become more humble and realize that these things aren't going to happen. So two quick AASP examples. Well, first of all, I'm jealous of every single one of you. That's the first problem. The people working in the pro sports, man, I want to do that. People going off to the Olympics, man, I want to do that. I want to do all of that stuff. It was 2 years ago, I went to everything about pro sports as my AASP focus without any job leads or anything else, but I was because I'm going to do that. With 4 kids at home, single dad, as you know the story. And so coming to terms with the idea that, maybe that's not going to happen. So this practice of the content that I was talking about has been something that I thought content would show up, when you get enough achievement. That didn't work. So this real practice of, that I'm actually exactly where I want to be because I chose to be here. So the one way that I help with my guilt is that I realized I really wouldn't do anything differently. I have to thank somebody who was talking about this, asked me that question, is well, what would you do differently? And I'm Actually, nothing. Even with all the ways that I've screwed up my life and the bad things that have happened, I know that I gave myself the best chance to succeed every moment of it. I did the very best that I could. Now, if I had the wisdom and knowledge I have now and you put that into my 20-year-old body, things would be different. But I had to learn this stuff as it went through and to really respect that for all the pain and the mistakes and the avenues that I didn't take and why I'm not in pro sports but I'm at where I'm at is because I chose all of that. And that's really the work for me, is to actually really seek out that content and realize that I've been in charge of it. And that seems to help. So the second story, just really quick, is like, I'm a huge Buffalo Bills fan, 4 Super Bowl losses. Like, that's the job that I want. I want to be on the sideline, I want to win that. But I've been obsessing about this for years. And I asked myself one day, so if Sean McDermott gives me a call and says, hey, we need you in Buffalo, if he called me today, I'd be like, my kid's got a drum recital on Tuesday. I can't go. And so I have to remind myself of that I've chosen not to put myself in that situation. And that helps.
Cool. I want to take a time out for a second and just say, this is really cool. So I don't know if you guys are getting anything out of it, but I appreciate the vulnerability and you guys really putting it out there. Because I think this is stuff we don't talk about. We just live it. And so I appreciate Hillary putting this together. And hopefully there's something that resonates, but that's really cool. The thing I didn't expect, I'm going to be super boring and pragmatic, but scheduling. Like, I'm very lucky in my role, and I have incredible autonomy. No one tells me where to be, when to be. In fact, my bosses are kind of crazy in that way that they'll literally say, we trust you to do the right thing. That's like their tagline. And I'm like, man, sound like a parent. But the key part for me, we have such a complex schedule. So with my wife's shifts that are all over the place, and the au pair who's only allowed to do 40 hours a week, every month we're having to map out, when I can take them to school, which I love to do when I'm at home. I want to take the boys to school, and then I go into Dunedin late. And that's something I'm committed to doing. And that means that I live, 55 miles away from our office in Florida. And that means I don't get there till 9:30, and a lot of our staff are there grinding from 7 a.m. And at first I was guilty about that until I realized that some of them don't need to be there at 7 a.m. and they're not taking their kids to school because they think they have to be there way before they're actually needed to be there. So in a leadership role, making sure that I was visibly taking time, like leaving early. I leave at 4:30 every day that I'm in Dunedin as best as I can, because it means I get to see my kids before bedtime and tell them stories and have that time. And I do that visibly, making sure that people know it's okay to get out and do that. But the complexity of our scheduling means that I have to do that in advance, and so I also have to be able to respond and be fluid. And I know it drives my wife mad when she's asking me when I can be there next week, and I'm like, I don't know. But that's a practical piece to the puzzle.
This next one, I don't know. I want to go first. You want to go first? But we're going to talk about the baby in the room. All right. So, maybe I go for. I did it 4 times. So, Jess and I are going to share our experience, because remember, we're not supposed to self-disclose and all that stuff and keep private. Like, there is no not self-disclosing when your body is carrying a child, and I make big babies, and I have it's just out there. And no one told me what to do, what to expect, how to handle it. And I've chose to do this 4 times. I've been fortunate enough to be able to have babies, and 4 of them. I am a terrible pregnant person. I hate all that ooey gooey, it's so cute, glowing vibe is just not me. My body, it can't do what it could do. And I got that from another wonderful mother who was like, I'm used to living my body and running and moving, and now I have this ginormous thing in the room with my clients. And I didn't realize this until my 4th kid, her name is London. I don't remember this until I didn't experience it, but when I'd walk into the door, my kids would be like, London, how are you? And I'm like, hi. I became 2 people, not 1. And it was a really weird, existential weirdness of I am not me anymore. I am two people, and that is there, and people want to know. And I do a lot of mental health in athletes, and my athletes are like, hey, like, what are you having? What's the baby? How are you feeling? Like, they're trying to protect me and take care of me, and no one talks about how you can navigate those conversations. They want to touch your belly. Random people want to touch your belly. Colleagues maybe want to touch your belly. I don't want you to touch my belly. I don't care if you ask me if you could touch my belly. It's still a little bit weird. I would never go up to Eddie and be like, hey, like, maybe I would. Maybe I've done that. But like in normal life, who comes up and is like, let me rub your belly? Like, can I touch it? Like, it doesn't happen. But for some reason, people think like when there's a child there, because babies are so cute, it gives this weird permission to do all the things that you're not supposed to do. Like, what? And now we have to talk about how to manage that in the room, because then I have people who have really hard attachment, and they're attached to me, and they're fearful if I'm gonna come back or not. And so I have to process what that means. I've had a client who was trying to get pregnant and couldn't get pregnant at the time, and I now have to disclose to her that I am pregnant, and how will that impact our working relationship? When do I stop taking clients? How do I tell them on the phone that I will be back, you know? Or when they first come back, I had this weird guilt to let them know, like, I just got back from maternity leave, because heaven forbid they'd think I was like 3 months pregnant right now when I'm 4 months postpartum. Because that's an awkward conversation to navigate too. When a client comes up, it's like, oh, when are you expecting? And I'm like, I don't know, man, that was 4 months ago. Thanks for commenting on my body. So I could go on. I'll stop.
Yeah, I think it's something we don't talk about enough, and that's why I appreciated Hillary wanting to put this in there and talk about it, because I do think people have a lot of opinions and thoughts and judgments, and I think I briefly mentioned it, but I remember negotiating a contract when I was 3 months pregnant and didn't look pregnant. And then I knew that I would not actually start with the team for my first event in person until I was 6 months pregnant. And so it's one of those things. I had some people saying like, oh, it's your right and you don't need to say anything. And I was like, this is a 4-year contract with an Olympic team. They're gonna figure it out. So I would rather be upfront. But I did have a lot of people asking like, how long are you gonna be off? What are you gonna be doing? And I will be honest, I took about a week off with my Olympic teams. Granted, I will tell you it was video, doing a lot of video chatting, and I didn't jump into traveling again, just with the way things worked out. And I know, being 4 months pregnant, our last chance qualifier for the Olympics with karate, a team I've now been with, or will have been with for 4 years, is 2 weeks after my due date in May. So it's just, there's a lot of balances, and I try to figure it out. I can guarantee you I will be available for them via video in May, but it's been really awkward. And I still remember someone, when I met them for the first time, people were like, are you pregnant? And I was 6 months pregnant. I thought I looked gigantic, but everyone was just like, are you pregnant? Are you not? Do I say anything? I don't know. And it's really incredibly awkward about when to tell people. I also wanted to share an interesting story just about even not being visibly pregnant, but with this pregnancy, I actually was in Lima, Peru for the Pan Am Games and was very, very sick. Norovirus was going around the entire athletic village, and I'm sharing bathrooms with all kinds of people, and everybody's seeing me vomiting all the time, and everybody's super worried about me. And I go in and I get tested, and I'm not sick. Finally, one of the athletic trainer goes, could you be pregnant? I was like, no. Oh, I could be. Maybe. I will admit, my husband travels a lot, so I was like, maybe, pretty sure. So then it's like, okay, so I'm vomiting all the time. I'm trying to figure this out. Do I start telling athletes? Do I start telling them, I promise y'all I'm not gonna get you sick, I'm just pregnant, when I'm 4 or 5 weeks along? I'll also say that with this stretch of trying to travel a little bit less, I went from Lima, Peru, and I will also say Zika was still a concern. So I'm panicking for weeks, just trying to figure out, until I could get testing at 12 weeks, so no Zika. But all these things that are going on internally, and I'm not telling anyone that I'm pregnant. I don't look pregnant, but I'm so ill. I spent 2 weeks, or I guess it wasn't 2 weeks because I haven't been doing that, but it was a little bit longer of a trip because they're fewer and far between in Tokyo. I can't have most of the food. Most of the athletes are looking at me like, what are you doing? I ended up having McDonald's every day at the venue because I couldn't eat anything else there. For anyone that's been pregnant or will be, the cuisine is kind of limited sometimes with fish and sushi and all of the things in
Your
Tokyo.
body rejecting it.
Yeah. So, and then I went on another trip to Munich, and the number of people are like, "Yay, you're going out during Oktoberfest," and I'm like, "If y'all only knew, if I see beer or sausage, won't work out well." So, I just wanted to share like the other piece of people not knowing you're pregnant and not knowing that, there's a baby in the room, and because I think all the things that Hillary said, and a lot of times it's still really hard when it's early on, you don't want to disclose. It's tough.
Yeah, I just got like anxiety thinking about this as she was going through it. Mints, lollipops, ice chips, those are all fun. But the other side of this is I wanted to ask the two men and dads here of how they experience this. It's really visible for us, but I mean, how do they experience bringing the baby into your working world and what that might look like?
I'm going to actually answer it differently because I think for men, I would say the baby's not in the room. And what I guess how I want to put this is I feel ashamed about not achieving. So when you think about manhood, or at least the way I've grown up and what I've been exposed to, the idea of what a man is in culture doesn't involve babies. It doesn't involve fatherhood. I mean, unless you find the right source, and thank goodness I have recently in my spirituality. But growing up, it was like, you got to be big, you got to be strong, you got to make the best income. It's about power, it's about achievement, it's about conquest. And even though you know that that's the culture, and you're constantly immersed in it, and so the story here of AASP is this is the first year when people are saying, "Oh, how was your year?" And usually I'm either telling about something that I did great or some achievement or some big thing, or if I didn't have something, it was what I was working on. And I found myself up until 30 minutes ago meeting somebody I hadn't seen all week to say, what had I done? And I get red and I'm embarrassed that I don't have anything to show for my year. Because what my year has been reinvesting in my health. It has been investing in my relationships. As I mentioned, I have 4 teenagers. It was spending time with them. And interestingly enough, it was really being present with my clients, like the clients that I had, the ones that, I went to school for and wanted to be a psychologist, and now I am, and suddenly that's not okay and that's not good enough anymore. And that the richness of that, and yet all I could feel is embarrassment and shame, and I'm not good enough, telling people here that again, even the fact that I said I haven't done anything this year except live a really quality life day to day. And that involves a large part about being a father and being present for these teens teenage years are hard. But being present and being able to be there instead of being somewhere else. But I couldn't say that with pride. Every time I said it with shame. And like, I hope it's okay, and looking for permission or looking for validation that I did make the right decision. So I look at it that the baby's not in the room, and I think that's a real problem for men because men, we are important as fathers. Like, I can't be a mother, and mothers can't be a father. It's a completely different role to our children. And we have to prioritize that in whatever way we can. But even more so, I'd like to be able to be more proud about it and say that, yeah, that's what I did this year, and man, that was good. But honestly, I don't, and that scares me.
I can relate to that, but I think you guys have way better contributions, so I know we have 10 minutes left. We want to keep going.
All right, this is our last question, and if y'all have questions, we'll have room for that too. So I think more importantly, I'm curious is how, now that we've been parents and are parents and will be parents and are great intermittent napping, because sleep is not a thing, how have babies impacted your work in any substantial way? As you've heard.
You know what? I'll take a different perspective on this for a second because there's an amazing assistant director I'm really lucky to work with on staff with Dr. Dara Harris, and she's coming from the medical world. And so rather than like focusing on us, we really are concerned about wellness across our entire baseball operations team. And so we actually did a survey across our staff to actually look at what was the personal, family impact of the role, what was the level of meaning that they had around the role, and what was the level of control. Taking from medical research, doctors, nurses, a lot of medical staff are in absolutely the same boat as I think a lot of what we've described. And we found like 100% that our staff were highly personally impacted. Those include things like even skipping meals, lack of sleep, missing family events, being late for family events, really trying to be more behavioral measures as opposed to like how many times a week are you, late for a family thing. And, it was funny that we noticed that as if you can have 2 of the 3. If you've got 3, you're at incredibly high risk of burnout. If the work is meaningful, if you have autonomy, you can deal with high personal impact. But we have to be super aware because we know it is super impactful. But one of the things around the medical piece that we're really trying to evolve and roll out in a systems, like from an organizational perspective, not really as a parent, more as a human that cares, I guess, is that there are 3 different parts that the medical profession are trying to tackle this and that we're trying to look at it too. One is the grit card. So it's like your personal resilience, whether that's suck it up and just do it better, which is often the message that we receive, right? But of course, like with MRT and CSF prep and actually being more deliberate about what skills do our staff have to be more resilient as a part. Probably a bigger one, though, is culture change. Like, what is the attitude in the workplace of bringing your kids in or leaving early to pick up from school? That it's less about the presenteeism of, hey, you got to stay and do it what everyone else does. But also something that's really small that was surprising but really impactful even in the medical community was what they call practice efficiencies. So in medicine, that was like having scribes, having administration support that actually helped take away. So I'm curious on people in the room probably, but when I get home, the kids get to bed, I'm on the computer, right? I'm watching a Netflix show or something, but I'm doing emails because I haven't done emails all day, and so you end up in this 24-hour hamster wheel. So I think we're trying to be really deliberate on a systematic level and looking at what are the different things we can do to make it better.
I mean, I think I've just been much more aware of the clients that I work with and being more attentive to their families. And even if it isn't with babies, I've started to recognize one athlete that I'm working with who had both of her parents pass and is trying to make her Olympic dream really happen for them. Or I have another athlete who was raised by her grandmother and her grandmother just passed. Like, it's just made me so much more attentive to the family aspect that I don't feel like I was in a way before I had a little one and before I started having a family.
Yeah, I think for me, advocacy has become a new platform of interest for me. And if we pay attention to what's going on in the news, these women, specifically runners, and I'm an avid runner, losing sponsorships because they are pregnant or are going to have a baby, and losing contracts and losing money and income, and they might be the main supporter and their Olympic dreams and coming back and the timeline they get to come back. Like, making a baby and carrying the baby and then recovering from the baby is hard work. Your body is amazing and beautiful, but then these women are asked 6 months later to go run a world championship and win, or you get no money. And so I started paying attention to maternity leave and rights and the cares, and a recent article that stood out to me too, it happens to men, like the Washington Nationals are playing, and a pitcher decided to not play at one of the division championship, like I think it was the second game against St. Louis, because his wife was having their 3rd kid. And there was press out there about how dare he choose to go be in the hospital, having their family and their baby. And I'm like, good for him, good on him and that organization to allow this man to go and be a dad, even if it was for 48 hours and then going back home. Like, that stuff I started paying attention to much more.
Yeah, this is a great question. I guess maybe summarize my story. What the kids have taught me is what I try to teach my athletes about engagement in the moment. Again, it was startling when my oldest left because I was suddenly hit with, it's done. it's like that retirement dinner exercise. And I'm like, I can't go back and do anything about his 18 years over again. It's over. Now, of course, we're still in touch, and, and when I look forward to interacting with as a college student, as an adult. But as my baby, he's done. And that helped me realize that, you know, if I did have to find a word for balance, I guess I would call maybe seasons. And my season right now is with 4 kids. And I can do wonderful work with the athletes that I have, and I can now be more present with them and invested when they're there, and I can enjoy that. And I've got 3 to 5 years before I get a whole lot of time freed up, and then I can win that Super Bowl or write that book or have that huge impact. Like that season's coming, and I'll only be better for it because of the work that I'm doing now. But right now, for these couple of years that I have left, and I've only got a few left, I can really be present there, and then I can go back to making that huge work impact. I know it's in me. It's just timing.
This was so cool. I'm so glad that we did this. Does anyone have any questions for us? You know, anything you want to share about, learn about, ask us? Yeah, great, please.
Well, mine's just more kind of a comment and question, like from the athlete perspective, like you were talking about. So I have done multiple sports, but I was a shooting athlete. Actually found out I was pregnant at the Olympic trials, which was the Rio Olympics. It was a psychological thing I wasn't prepared for going into the next day. But I continued to shoot pregnant, and I was at the training center. And our national team coach, it's just he's not from American descent, and he would always make comments about my weight. Like, so I, come back from training and he'd be bigger every time. So every time we went to the range, it was a little bit of hey, you got fatter this time, didn't you? And I like he definitely thought he was being funny, but like.
Yes, I think this.
It's just like from both sides of it, and following all the runners and their experience with oxygen shooting, you don't know how many financial contributions that were staked on it, but it's just something people don't think about when they interact with you.
Yeah, you gave me like a light bulb moment. Like when we look at coaching education, like I remember specifically coaching like men coaches for your adolescent athletes about menstrual cycles, and like did they have like tampons and pads and like stuff available to them, an extra pair of clothing, because it's really embarrassing, but like are they aware to talk about their cycle? But I think this is another avenue of how can we educate coaches about this process. Like there will be pregnant women potentially, and or dads that are going to have to take leave, and I think that's a place that we could go. I think it's great. I heard about childcare. I couldn't hear you.
Say the
sorry.
second part.
Everyone talked about taking care of their children and work, and I was wondering, was there time for
Oh, from a partner. Oh, I schedule dates. I have set time. It sounds crazy and silly. We have our own calendar, and we're going to schedule a date, and it might be at 10:30, sometimes even 10:30 to 11. We're going to watch a TV show, but like, yes, it's very systematic and scheduled in my house.
Same. Yeah, and I think with both of us being in the fields, like Portland, like we're both here without our little one, and I think that was really important. I also had a really cool opportunity to work with a professional soccer team in Germany, and my husband travels to Germany with Special Forces, and so I made sure those trips lined up to where we had time. So it's not only like scheduling the dates, but also like we've been really intentional about some of the work trips. Very specifically about the boundaries I started setting. I remember they wanted me to go on one more trip last December to Cabo San Lucas at an all-inclusive resort for a competition, and I said, what if you would buy a ticket for my husband, and could he go? And they were like, absolutely, and I was shocked, but we went early, we stayed late, I did work in the middle, and he was able to go to the beach. So like, I've also enjoyed not only those dates, but like professionally when we can make things work together, we can work on projects together. So some of those have been really important for us.
Yeah, I've not been great at that. So I'm glad you bring it up, because I think even just watching a show together, typing away at emails, it's so easy to forget or prioritize kids over your spouse. So I think it's a great thing to call out, the date piece, scheduling, You know, my wife and I were able to get away to Italy together with no kids. That's the first time we've had time together away like that for 5 years. So, you know, you just need to do it. And again, one of the luxuries of my job is sometimes I can just do it. And, you know, and I think that was one of the blessings of my bosses too, is like, there's always more work to be done. So do what you need to do. But sometimes with the achievement focus Eddie's talking about too, we want to do it, right? We always want to do more. And so keeping yourself honest and check and balances, I'm glad you brought that up. It's great.
Got anything to add? I mean, we're out of time, but we can, I mean, I'm cool staying if y'all want to stay.
Yeah, we can do one more question.
There's no one coming in here, so.
Just one question, probably more for Angus than anybody else. In baseball in general, coaches are skewing younger, especially at the lower levels. How do you try to work with them to balance that it's not, even though they might not have a spouse or children at home, that spending 16 hours a day at the stadium or whatever it might be isn't good for their future?
Yeah, so yeah, the question was about, you know, I've labeled it presenteeism. It's, you know, especially guys who don't have kids, that it's the 16-hour days, more is better. And I think, again, I look at myself as a leader, too, to really talk about being smart and having a balance. And I think there is sometimes an unfair comparison of people who have kids and they get to go home early to pick up school or come in later, and that the others are grinding. And I think it's respecting everyone's time, and it's respecting blend for everybody, kids or not. You know, so I think that's a really good point. And the things I mentioned before about what is the story, what's the narrative around wellness and self-care, regardless of kids or not, because we tend to live in an industry where it's more and it's extreme, and that's, again, where this 50-50 notion is wrong.
And I'd love to add the people like Angus in some of the departments, and I would even put it on some of the men. The more you all can be those role models, it ultimately helps men and women. I just want to give a shout out to my boss, Mark, at the University of Denver. He's been incredible with anything with parental leave and things like that, and has taken it himself. So that it sets a really good precedent when we need to. We've been working on my leave for the spring. I'll only have like 3 or 4 weeks left in the academic term, and they said I had to take it during that, where men don't. So he's actually pushed back and said, wait, what if she finished her classes remotely? And apparently this is making big waves at our university. So there's things that, like, I think that, again, if you have that privilege, whatever privilege that might be, if you can use it, like people like Angus are talking about, for those that don't have it, because I think otherwise I would have just been stuck, which, again, I'm very appreciative to have leave, I should say. And it was amazing that they weren't going to make me take off long before I was due and not teach. So,
Do you ever feel as though you sports psych your own kids? Or do you get backlash because they think that you are, and then there's kind of an imbalance there?
Oh, man, I do a lot of breathing with them and cool down breaths, and I'm teaching them, let's take your cool down breaths. And we hold our hands together and we breathe. Yeah, absolutely. It's part of parenting. I think that's the benefit we have. But I know my limits also, right? We call it, I'm not going to, I did it in my ethics class. If I have to refer to someone, I would. But yeah, absolutely. I teach them these life lessons and skills and breathing and trying to be cool.
I think our child's screwed with me and my husband both being in the field, so yes, I think we try to balance it a lot. And again, if she ever needed a referral or future kids need referrals, I would jump on that. And I was like, bless her heart, the way we talk, and even my husband and I talking to each other. So I heard you say this, and I think what I'm hearing is this.
Yeah, use your words.
Yes.
One, I'll say real quick. Never mind the kids, I need it. I think I'm probably, a lot of people know me will say I'm very level-headed and calm. Nothing will get me pissed off and frustrated than my kids, who will absolutely push my buttons. And so I think practicing what I preach for parenting is definitely the hardest job.
Yeah, I guess for me, I try to do it more subtly. What's been frustrating is that I thought I'd raise all these little athletes that were just as driven and everything, but they have their own lives and their own minds and their own interests. And so I haven't had the opportunity to raise them like little athletes or mentally tough. But at the very same time, the way that I will take their everyday lives or, just kind of practice all of this stuff and model it, I think is really the greatest thing, that they see me exercise, even the ones that can't stand to sweat. So I think mostly in the modeling as opposed to overtly sports psyching them, I think has been beneficial. Should we probably officially end, or?
We go almost.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for this. This is something that so many of us relate to, but like you said, it's a conversation that a lot of people feel like aren't comfortable having with each other. I had to resist the urge pulling a chair up next to you all to join in on your conversation off of my own stories and experiences to definitely relate. I think it's great that we're having this at a large level of conference, and it took a lot of bravery, and really appreciate all your transparency. So
Thank you. And I'll end with that point. These are our stories, and it's our journey, and like my world fits my world, and so I don't expect any of you all to make your schedule map how I do it. Like, don't go work 14-hour days and then go do. Like, that's what works for me, and I'm blessed to have that. But this is just our share for you to also relate to. So thank y'all.
Yeah, and I'd like
Thank
to
you, guys.
extend that, particularly for the men, if, like, I feel alone in the room with, or in the world with this idea of it. So keeping the conversation going. We don't want this just to be an hour and then maybe talk about it next year. But if you need that support or you want to explore this, I don't know if I can't speak for everybody, but I'm certainly open to more conversation, phone calls. Hopefully I'm easy to reach.
Yay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.